The Zephyrin transport ship Void's Edge drifted through the black emptiness between star systems, its hull scarred by weapons fire, and its life support systems failing. Captain Killa 9 watched the readouts with growing desperation as the oxygen levels dropped another percentage point. Behind her, the cramped cargo hold contained 300 refugees from 12 different species, all sharing one terrible thing in common. They had been exiled from their homeworlds. The ship's navigation officer, a tall Nexari with crystalline skin that normally glowed blue but now flickered weakly, turned from his console. "Captain, we have a problem. The nearest inhabitable world is Earth, but the Galactic Council has classified it as a restricted primitive zone. Landing there would violate 17 different treaties." Killa 9's 4 arms worked frantically across her control panel. "Show me our other options, Vex." The holographic display flickered to life, showing their current position in the outer rim of the galaxy. Red markers indicated hostile territory. Yellow showed worlds that had already refused them sanctuary. And the few green dots representing potential safe harbors were all too far away for their failing ship to reach. "There are none, Captain," Vex said quietly. "Earth is our only choice." In the cargo hold, the refugees huddled together in family groups. The Kelmorians, a peaceful fungal species, had been exiled for refusing to surrender their spore libraries to military researchers. Next to them sat a family of Threnodidae, their normally musical voices silent after being cast out for spreading dangerous philosophical ideas about individual freedom. A group of young Azurians clustered near the viewport, their blue-scaled faces pressed against the metal, searching for any sign of hope in the star-filled darkness. These were not criminals or warriors. They were scholars, artists, healers, and teachers who had committed the crime of thinking differently in a galaxy that demanded conformity. The Galactic Council's new policies left no room for dissent, no tolerance for cultural preservation, and no mercy for those who refused to bend. Dr. Nira Vex, a Centaurian xenobiologist with silver hair that moved like liquid mercury, made her way through the crowd, checking on the injured. Her people had been scattered across the galaxy when their homeworld was strip-mined for rare minerals. The few survivors had been labeled resource-displaced persons and told to integrate into other societies, abandoning their language, customs, and identity. "How much longer do we have?" asked Jorik, an elderly Saurian historian whose entire species had been declared culturally obsolete after refusing to adopt standardized galactic education protocols. His reptilian features showed deep worry lines, and his usually proud posture had sagged with exhaustion. "The captain is doing everything she can," Dr. Vex replied, but her own doubts were clear in her voice. Everyone knew their situation was desperate. Up on the bridge, Killa 9 made the decision that would change everything. "Set course for Earth. Full speed." "Captain, if the Council finds out we violated the primitive world protection protocols, the Council already wants us dead or disappeared," Killa 9 interrupted. "What more can they do to us?" As the ship changed course toward the small blue-green world in the Sol system, none of them knew they were about to encounter something the galaxy had forgotten existed, a species that measured strength not in conquest, but in compassion. Earth grew larger on their view screen, and Captain Killa 9 opened a transmission on all frequencies, speaking in Galactic Standard. "This is Refugee Transport Void's Edge requesting emergency landing permission. We have 300 souls aboard, life support failing, and nowhere else to go. We are not invaders. We are the exiled, the forgotten, the unwanted. Please, if anyone is listening, we need help." The response came faster than anyone expected, in the same language, but with an accent none of them had heard before. "Void's Edge, this is Houston Space Control. We read you loud and clear. You are cleared for emergency landing at coordinates we're transmitting now. Medical teams are standing by. Welcome to Earth." Dr. Vex looked up from her medical scanner in amazement. They understood us. They speak Galactic Standard. "More than that," Captain Killa 9 said, staring at the readout of landing coordinates and atmospheric data that was streaming in. "They're helping us without even asking who we are or what we've done." As their failing ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, the refugees pressed against every available viewport. Below them spread a world of impossible beauty. White clouds swirling over blue oceans, green continents dotted with lights that marked vast cities, and no signs of the industrial pollution or environmental devastation that marked most inhabited worlds. The landing was rough but successful. As the ship's ramp lowered with a hiss of equalizing pressure, the refugees got their first taste of Earth air, sweet, oxygen-rich, and carrying scents of growing things that many of them had never experienced. What they saw next defied every expectation. Waiting for them on a landing field were hundreds of humans, beings that looked surprisingly similar to several of the refugee species, but were clearly their own unique type. They wore simple clothes in bright colors, and their faces showed no fear, no suspicion, only concern and welcome. A woman with dark skin and graying hair stepped forward. She wore no uniform, no symbols of authority, just a simple blue jacket with words in human script that Dr. Vex's translator identified as International Refugee Assistance Coalition. "My name is Dr. Sarah Chun," the woman said in perfect galactic standard. "We've been waiting for you." The refugees looked at each other in confusion. "Waiting for us?" Captain Keela, 9, asked as she descended the ramp. "But we only just decided to come here." "How could you know?" Dr. Chun smiled, and something in that expression spoke of knowledge and preparation that went far deeper than chance. "We've been monitoring galactic communications for decades. We know what's been happening out there. We know about the exile edicts, the cultural purges, the species displacement protocols. We've been preparing for the day when those who needed sanctuary would find their way to Earth." Behind her, the human rescue teams were already moving into action with an efficiency that spoke of extensive planning. Medical personnel began helping the injured while others started distributing food, water, and emergency supplies. Everything was organized, but it felt warm rather than institutional. A young human male approached Dr. Vex with a scanner that looked remarkably advanced. "Mom, I'm James Rodriguez, xenobiological specialist. Can I get a medical reading to make sure our atmosphere is suitable for your species?" Dr. Vex stared at the device in his hands. "That's Thraxian technology. Where did you get this?" James smiled. "We built it, based on refugee testimonies and galactic technical specifications we've intercepted over the years. We wanted to be ready to help anyone who might need it." As the hours passed and the immediate crisis of landing and medical care passed, the refugees began to understand something incredible. Earth hadn't just received them. It had been preparing for them. There were temporary housing facilities designed to accommodate different atmospheric and gravitational needs. There were translation specialists who had learned dozens of alien languages. There were cultural liaisons who understood the specific needs of different species. But most shocking of all was the why. That evening, as the refugees gathered in a large assembly hall, Dr. Chun addressed them all. Around the walls hung banners in dozens of languages, including several that were thought to be extinct after their speakers had been scattered by the council. "Many of you are wondering why we're helping you," she began. "The answer is simple. We humans know what it's like to be cast out, to be told we don't belong, to have our cultures threatened and our voices silenced. Not by aliens, but by our own kind. We've spent thousands of years learning, sometimes the hard way, that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker." She gestured to the crowd of humans and refugees mingling together. "Every culture that takes refuge here makes Earth richer. Every perspective that finds safety here makes humanity wiser. Every person who finds home here makes our world better." Captain Keela, 9, stood up slowly. "Dr. Chun, with respect, we bring nothing but problems. We have no resources to offer, no technology you need, no strategic value. We are burden, not blessing." Dr. Chin's smile never wavered. "Captain, you misunderstand what we consider valuable. You bring stories we've never heard, art we've never seen, music we've never experienced, and ways of thinking we've never considered. You bring the universe to our doorstep not as conquerors or traitors, but as family." She paused, looking around at the faces, human and alien alike, that were all focused on her words. "Besides, we have a saying here on Earth. The measure of a civilization is how it treats its most vulnerable members. If that's true, then what does it say about a galaxy that casts out its teachers, its artists, its philosophers, and its healers? And what does it say about a world that opens its arms to welcome them home?" As the refugees settled into their first night on Earth, Many of them felt something they hadn't experienced in months or even years: hope. But they also began to understand that they had stumbled onto something the Galactic Council had tried very hard to hide from them. Earth wasn't a primitive world. It was a world that had chosen a different path than the rest of the galaxy, a path that valued people over power, culture over conquest, and compassion over control. And now, for the first time in their lives, the refugees were about to experience what that meant. 3 weeks after their arrival, Dr. Nira Vex stood in what the humans called the Integration Center, though it felt nothing like the cold processing facilities she had expected. Instead, it resembled a cross between a university campus and a welcoming community center. The buildings were designed with multiple architectural styles to accommodate different species' needs, and gardens filled with plants from dozens of worlds created pockets of familiar beauty for homesick refugees. "I still don't understand how you knew," she said to Dr. Chun as they walked past a group of young Azurians learning human languages alongside human children learning Azurian musical communication. "Our exile was decided in secret council sessions. The vote was classified." Dr. Chun stopped beside a memorial wall covered in names and dates, but these weren't casualties of war. They were refugees who had died in space before finding sanctuary, their ships lost to equipment failure, starvation, or attacks by Council enforcement vessels. 27 years ago, Dr. Chun began, a single-person escape pod landed in the Pacific Ocean. Inside was a dying Zarathi diplomat named Cole Vin, who had been sentenced to exile for refusing to surrender his planet's agricultural data to military terraforming projects. He lived just long enough to warn us what was coming. She touched one of the names on the wall gently. Cole Vin told us that the Galactic Council was moving toward complete cultural standardization, that anyone who preserved inefficient traditions, maintained unnecessary languages, or practiced outdated customs would eventually be labeled as obstacles to galactic unity. He begged us to prepare for the refugees who would come. Dr. Vex felt her silver hair ripple with emotion. The Zarathi had been among the first to disappear. Their agricultural knowledge had made them invaluable, but their refusal to weaponize their biotechnology had made them dangerous to the Council's vision. "So you've been preparing for nearly 3 decades. "Longer than that," said a new voice. They turned to see Professor Marcus Webb, a human historian who had become the unofficial chronicler of refugee stories. He was elderly by human standards, with white hair and deep lines around his eyes, but his mind was sharp and his passion for preserving cultural heritage burned bright. "Humanity has always been a species of refugees," he explained as he joined them. "Our own history is filled with peoples forced to flee their homelands, to seek sanctuary in strange places, to rebuild their lives from nothing. When Colvin warned us about galactic exile policies, it wasn't hard to convince our governments to prepare. We knew we'd want someone to help us if we were in that situation." They walked past a classroom where Captain Killa, 9, was teaching young humans about Zephyrian engineering principles while learning human mechanical techniques in return. Her 4 arms moved gracefully as she demonstrated concepts that required human teachers to use computer simulations. "The Council believes that standardization creates efficiency," Professor Webb continued. "One language for all communication. One educational system for all children. One set of laws for all worlds. One way of thinking for all minds." They see diversity as waste. "But you see it differently," Dr. Vex observed. "We learned the hard way that diversity is survival," Dr. Chen said. "Every time humans tried to force conformity on ourselves, we lost knowledge, we lost perspectives, and we lost solutions to problems we didn't even know we had. The greatest advances in human civilization came from the collision and combination of different ways of thinking." They entered a research facility where something extraordinary was taking place. Human scientists were working alongside refugee researchers from dozens of species, not just sharing knowledge, but creating entirely new fields of study. Dr. Vex watched in amazement as a Kelmorian biotechnician collaborated with human geneticists to develop new medical treatments that combined fungal regeneration principles with human cellular therapy. "This is impossible," she whispered. "The research integration laws prohibit cross-species technological development. The Council maintains that each species should advance separately to prevent exactly this," interrupted Dr. Elena Vasquez, the facility's director. She was a young human with an infectious enthusiasm for discovery. They're afraid of what happens when different ways of thinking combine. Look at what we've accomplished in just 3 weeks. She led them to a display showing breakthrough after breakthrough. Azurian sonic healing combined with human surgical techniques to create non-invasive medical procedures. Threnodai philosophy merged with human psychological theory to develop new approaches to trauma recovery. Nexari crystalline technology integrated with human electronics to create communication systems that could translate not just words, but emotional context across species barriers. Each refugee group that arrives brings new possibilities, Dr. Vasquez explained. The Saurians' historical analysis methods are helping us understand galactic politics in ways we never could before. The Centaurians' preservation techniques are revolutionizing how we store and protect cultural artifacts. Every perspective makes everything better. But it wasn't just the technology that impressed Dr. Vex. It was the attitude. In every lab, every classroom, every common area, humans and refugees work together as equals. There is no sense of charity or condescension, no feeling that the refugees were guests who should be grateful for scraps. Instead, there is genuine partnership, mutual respect, and shared excitement about what they could accomplish together. How do your people accept this so easily? Dr. Vex asked. Most species need generations to adapt to working with aliens. Your people seem to treat it as natural. Professor Webb laughed. Dr. Vex, look around this room. What do you see? She looked at the researchers, humans with skin in dozens of shades, facial features that suggested ancestry from every continent on Earth, clothing that reflected traditions from hundreds of human cultures. I see diversity. Exactly. Humanity never was one people. We're thousands of peoples who learn to work together. We speak thousands of languages, practice hundreds of religions, cook millions of different foods, and tell countless different stories about what it means to be human. Working with alien refugees isn't strange for us. It's just more of what we've always done. As they toured more of the facility, Dr. Vex began to understand something that challenged everything she thought she knew about civilization and progress. The Galactic Council had always taught that advancement required unity, that progress demanded standardization, that strength came from conformity. But here on Earth, she was seeing the opposite. She watched a group of human children learning Kelmorian spore singing, their young voices attempting the complex harmonics that allowed the fungal beings to communicate with their entire ecosystem. Nearby, Kelmorian youngsters were learning human art techniques, their fine motor control, creating paintings with a precision that amazed their human teachers. Dr. Chun, she said slowly, what you're doing here, it's not just refugee assistance. You're building something entirely new. Dr. Chin nodded. We're proving that the Council is wrong. That diversity doesn't weaken civilization, it strengthens it. That different doesn't mean deficient. That cooperation is more powerful than conquest. They ended their tour in the evening at a cultural center where the day's discoveries were being celebrated. Refugees and humans shared food, music, stories, and laughter in a celebration that felt both ancient and revolutionary. Dr. Vex watched a Threnodai philosopher debating ethics with human theologians while their children played together in games that combined rules from a dozen different worlds. This is what they're afraid of, she realized aloud. This is why they exile us. Yes, Dr. Chin agreed. Because if word gets out that diversity makes us stronger, that cooperation creates more than competition, that wisdom comes from many voices rather than one, then their entire system of control collapses. As the celebration continued around them, Dr. Vex felt something she hadn't experienced since her own exile: purpose. For the first time, she understood that their forced journey to Earth hadn't been an ending. It had been the beginning of a revolution that would change the galaxy forever. But even as hope grew among the refugees and their human hosts, none of them knew that their activities had already been detected by Council surveillance networks. In the depths of space, orders were being transmitted to the most feared organization in the galaxy, the Cultural Enforcement Division. And Earth had just made their most wanted list. The alert came at 3:47 a.m. Earth Standard Time, transmitted simultaneously to every major government and defense installation on the planet. Admiral Sarah Martinez, Earth's Director of Planetary Defense, stood in the underground command center beneath New Geneva, studying the holographic display that showed 17 massive ships approaching the Sol system at faster-than-light speeds. Configuration analysis confirms it, reported her intelligence officer, Commander Liu Wei. These are Council Cultural Enforcement Division vessels, military-grade, designed for planetary suppression operations. Around the command center, the assembled leaders of Earth's various nations and the refugee communities watched in tense silence. Captain Keela, 9, stood with Dr. Chun and Professor Webb, her forearms unconsciously reaching for weapons that weren't there. "What's their standard operational procedure?" Admiral Martinez asked. Keela 9's voice was grim. "They establish orbital blockade, then demand immediate surrender of all culturally dangerous elements for processing. Any world that refuses faces bombardment of population centers until compliance is achieved." "Processing," Dr. Chun repeated coldly. "That's a euphemism for mass executions, isn't it?" "Usually," Keela 9 confirmed. "Though sometimes they use memory erasure technology to remove harmful knowledge and cultural programming. Many consider death preferable." Admiral Martinez turned to address the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have 18 hours before those ships arrive. I need to know our options." General Hassan al-Rashid, representing the African Union Defense Forces, spoke first. "Our military capabilities are limited compared to galactic standard technology. We have nuclear weapons, but their shields can absorb anything we can throw at them." "What about the defensive installations we've been building?" asked Director Yuki Tanaka of the Pacific Rim Alliance. "The orbital platforms, the planetary defense grid?" Commander Liu Wei pulled up tactical displays. "Operational, but untested against Council technology. We're basically comparing spears to energy cannons." A voice from the back of the room surprised everyone. It was Jorik, the elderly Saurian historian, who had been quietly listening. "Admiral Martinez, may I speak?" "Of course, Professor Jorik." The reptilian scholar moved forward slowly, his ancient eyes showing both wisdom and determination. "You are thinking like prey animals facing predators. This is understandable, but incorrect. The Cultural Enforcement Division has advantages in weapons and shields, yes, but they have weaknesses you do not see." "What kind of weaknesses?" Admiral Martinez asked. "They have never faced resistance like what you represent," Jorik explained. "Every world they have conquered fell into one of 3 categories. Worlds that surrendered immediately from fear, worlds that fought with conventional tactics, and were quickly overwhelmed, or worlds that turned on their own refugee populations to appease the Council." Professor Webb leaned forward. "You're saying they've never faced a world that chose to fight specifically to protect refugees?" "More than that," Dr. Vex added, understanding dawning in her voice. "They've never faced a world where the refugees and the native population were truly integrated, where the technological and tactical knowledge of dozens of species was being shared freely." Captain Keela 9's forearms suddenly stiffened with realization. "The defense codes. Every Council ship has standardized defense protocols, but those protocols assume they're fighting unified resistance from single species. They're not designed to handle coordinated multi-species tactics." Admiral Martinez felt the first spark of hope. "Go on." "Zephyrian engineering," Keela 9 continued, her voice gaining strength. "Combined with Nexari crystalline technology, Azurian sonic systems, and Threnodite tactical philosophy, we could create weapons and defenses they've never seen before." Dr. Elena Vasquez stepped forward from where she'd been standing with the research teams. "We've already been doing exactly that. Not as weapons, but as research tools. The technological integration projects we've been working on, they could be modified." "Modified how?" Admiral Martinez asked. "The sonic healing arrays we developed with the Azurians could be reconfigured as sonic disruptors. The Nexari communication crystals could overload their sensor networks. The Kelmorian bioengineering could create organic components that wouldn't show up on their scanners." Around the room, refugees and humans began speaking at once, ideas flowing like water breaking through a dam. The Threnodai offered their philosophical understanding of group psychology to predict Council tactical decisions. The Saurians provided historical analysis of every Cultural Enforcement Division operation in the past century. The Centaurians offered techniques for preserving and protecting the cultural artifacts that the Council would try to destroy. But it was a quiet human voice that changed everything. What if we don't just defend? The speaker was Dr. Sarah Chun, and her words cut through the excited chatter like a blade. What if we attack their real weakness? Which is? Admiral Martinez asked. Truth, Dr. Chun said simply. The entire Council system depends on the suppression of information. They can only maintain control as long as the galaxy believes their propaganda. That diversity is weakness, that standardization is strength, that resistance is futile. She gestured to the refugees around the room. But we have living proof that they're wrong. We have documentation of their crimes. We have evidence of what cooperation and diversity can accomplish. What if, instead of just fighting their ships, we fight their lies? Commander Lu Wei looked puzzled. You're suggesting an information war against the most powerful communication network in the galaxy? I'm suggesting we use their own network against them, Dr. Chen replied. Captain Killa, 9, do Council ships monitor and record everything during enforcement operations? Yes, Killa, 9 answered slowly, beginning to understand. For intelligence gathering and documentation of compliance. But those records are transmitted directly to Council headquarters. Exactly. So whatever we do here, whatever we prove here, gets recorded and transmitted to the heart of the galactic government. And if their own records show that a single world full of refugees and humans successfully resisted their most elite forces, the implications hung in the air like electricity before a storm. Professor Webb was the first to voice it. It would prove that everything the Council teaches is a lie. Other worlds would see that resistance is possible. The exile population scattered across the galaxy would have hope. Admiral Martinez felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. So we're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for the future of galactic civilization. No, said Jorg firmly. You are fighting for the soul of civilization. The question is not whether technology advances or populations grow. The question is whether intelligence beings have the right to be different, to think differently, to choose their own paths. Over the next 16 hours, something unprecedented happened on Earth. Refugee knowledge and human ingenuity combined in ways that defied every assumption about technological development. Weapons that had never existed before were designed, built, and installed. Defensive systems that violated conventional physics were activated. Communication networks that could penetrate any known jamming technology went online. But, more importantly, a message was prepared. It was written in 847 different languages and communication methods. It contained the personal testimonies of every refugee on Earth, documentation of the Council's crimes, evidence of the technological and cultural advances that diversity had made possible, and proof that cooperation created more than competition ever could. When the Council fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system, they found something they had never encountered before, a world that was ready for them. Not just ready to fight, but ready to prove them wrong. Admiral Zurex Prime of the Cultural Enforcement Division opened communications from the command deck of his flagship, the Galactic Order. His message was the same one he had delivered to 37 worlds. Primitive world designation Earth. You are in violation of galactic law by harboring culturally dangerous refugees. Surrender them immediately for processing, or face the consequences of your defiance. The response came from a human woman whose voice was steady and unafraid. Admiral, this is Admiral Sarah Martinez of Earth Defense Forces. We reject your authority, we reject your laws, and we reject your definition of danger. The only thing dangerous here is the truth you're trying to suppress. But you're welcome to try and take us. As Admiral Zurex Prime prepared to order the bombardment that would begin what he expected to be a quick victory, he had no idea that he was about to participate in the most important battle in galactic history. And he certainly had no idea that he was going to lose. The Battle of Earth lasted exactly 4 hours and 27 minutes, but its effects would ripple across the galaxy for generations. Admiral Zurex Prime began his attack with standard Cultural Enforcement Division protocol, a demonstration bombardment of an uninhabited area to show the planet's defenders the futility of resistance. His targeting computers locked onto a barren island in Earth's Pacific Ocean and fired a concentrated energy beam designed to vaporize everything in a 10-kilometer radius. The beam struck a shimmering barrier 50 kilometers above the island's surface and simply stopped. The energy dissipated harmlessly into space as if it had hit a perfect mirror. Tactical report, Admiral Zurex Prime demanded, his four-eyed gaze focused on the impossible readings. Sir, the defensive field appears to be some kind of crystalline matrix, but our sensors show it as organic tissue. The energy absorption rate is beyond our computational models. On Earth's surface, in the Primary Defense Control Center, Dr. Elena Vasquez monitored the hybrid biocrystalline shields that 3 weeks of refugee-human cooperation had made possible. Kelmorian living crystals grown through Nexary matrix technology, powered by modified human fusion reactors, and coordinated by Azurian harmonic resonance systems. Shield efficiency at 97%, she reported to Admiral Martinez. We can maintain this for approximately 18 hours against current bombardment levels. But Admiral Zurex Prime was far from finished. He ordered his fleet to spread out and begin systematic bombardment from multiple angles, a tactic that had broken the defenses of every previous world. 17 massive warships opened fire simultaneously, their combined output capable of cracking a planet's crust. The shield held, but, more importantly, something else happened that the Council Admiral had never seen before. Earth fired back. The weapons that struck his fleet defied every principle of military technology he understood. Sonic disruptors that vibrated his ship's hulls at frequencies that bypassed their energy shields entirely. Crystalline projectiles that passed through defensive barriers like ghosts, only becoming solid when they reached critical systems. Biomechanical viruses that converted his ship's own materials into neutral matter. But strangest of all were the coordination patterns. Council tactical computers were designed to predict and counter military strategies based on single-species thinking. They had databases containing the combat patterns of every known civilization. What they couldn't process was a defense strategy that combined the mathematical precision of Zephyrian engineering with the intuitive flow of Threnodai philosophy, executed through Nexary network coordination and powered by human adaptability. Admiral, his communications officer, reported with barely controlled panic. We're losing the hegemony and the compliance. Their defense systems are being systematically neutralized by weapons that shouldn't exist. Admiral Zurex Prime stared at the tactical display as 2 of his most powerful ships went dark. How is this possible? Our intelligence reports said this was a primitive world with a few scattered refugees. Sir, his intelligence officer said quietly, our intelligence was wrong. What the Admiral didn't understand was that he wasn't just fighting Earth defenses. He was fighting the combined knowledge and determination of dozens of species that the Council had tried to destroy. Every exile, every refugee, every person who had been cast out for the crime of thinking differently was now contributing to the defense of the one world that had welcomed them home. Captain Keela, 9 coordinated fighter squadrons that used Zephyrian piloting techniques impossible for single-species crews. Dr. Vex directed bioweapon countermeasures that protected Earth's defenders from the Council's chemical attacks. Professor Jorah provided real-time tactical analysis based on historical patterns that let Earth's forces anticipate every move the Council fleet made. But the real battle wasn't being fought with weapons and shields. It was being fought with information. While the Admiral focused on military tactics, every second of the engagement was being recorded by his own ships and automatically transmitted to Council headquarters, just as Dr. Chun had known it would be. But what the Council was receiving wasn't documentation of another quick victory. Instead, they were getting something that would shatter their control forever. Proof that everything they believed was wrong. The transmissions showed Council ships, the most advanced military technology in the galaxy, being outfought by a supposedly primitive world. They showed weapons and defenses that were clearly beyond any single species' capability to develop, proving that cooperation between different peoples created innovation impossible for unified societies. Most importantly, they showed refugees, people the Council had labeled as dangerous dissidents and cultural terrorists, fighting with skill, courage, and tactical brilliance to defend their new home. In Council chambers across the galaxy, politicians and military leaders watched in growing shock as their most elite forces were systematically dismantled by the very people they had tried to eliminate. The turning point came when Captain Killa, 9 led a squadron of human and alien fighters in a coordinated assault on Admiral Xerex Prime's flagship. Using Azurian sonic technology to map the ship's internal structure, Threnodite tactical philosophy to predict crew reactions, and human piloting skills that prioritized adaptation over protocol, they managed to penetrate the flagship's defenses and disable its primary weapon systems. Admiral, Captain Killanine's voice came over the communication system, speaking in perfect council standard. This is Captain Killanine, formerly of the Zephyrian Defense Force, currently of the Earth Defense Alliance. I'm giving you one opportunity to surrender your fleet and submit to Refugee Tribunal for Crimes against Galactic Civilization. The bridge of the Galactic Order fell silent. In the entire history of the Cultural Enforcement Division, no one had ever demanded their surrender. Admiral Xerex Prime's response was to order his remaining ships to charge their planet killer weapons, massive devices designed to crack worlds' crust and render them uninhabitable. If he couldn't defeat Earth conventionally, he would destroy it entirely. That was when Earth revealed its final surprise. Admiral, came Admiral Martinez's calm voice over the communication system. I wouldn't do that if I were you. You see, we've been monitoring your transmissions to Council headquarters. Every second of this battle has been recorded and broadcast. The entire galaxy has been watching a supposedly primitive world defeat the Council's most advanced fleet using the combined knowledge of all the refugees you've tried to destroy. If you use planet killer weapons now, you'll be proving to every world in the galaxy that the Council resorts to genocide when its lies are exposed. She paused, letting the implications sink in. But more than that, Admiral, we've been transmitting our own message alongside your recordings. The testimonies of every refugee here, documentation of the Council's crimes, and proof of what diversity and cooperation can accomplish. Your own communication network has been carrying the evidence that will bring down your government. Across the galaxy, on worlds that had lived in fear of Council reprisals, populations were gathering around communication centers and viewing screens. They were seeing, for the first time, that resistance was possible. They were learning that the refugees they had been afraid to help were actually the key to freedom from Council control. They were discovering that diversity wasn't weakness. It was the strength that could defeat the most powerful military force in known space. Admiral Xerex Prime realized, too late, that he had walked into a trap more sophisticated than anything his tactical computers could have predicted. He had brought the instruments of his government's destruction with him, wrapped in the assumption that he was fighting primitives and dissidents. Admiral Martinez, he said slowly, what are your terms? Unconditional surrender of your fleet. Full cooperation with refugee tribunals investigating Council crimes. And a complete transmission to all Council worlds of everything that happened here today, along with Earth's formal declaration of independence from Council authority. And if I refuse? Admiral Martinez's voice carried a note of steel that had nothing to do with weapons and everything to do with absolute moral certainty. Then you'll be responsible for showing the entire galaxy what the Council really is, an organization that destroys worlds when it can't control them. Either way, Admiral, your government is finished. The only question is whether it ends with justice or with everyone seeing that it was built on genocide. In Council chambers across the galaxy, emergency sessions were being called. On refugee ships hiding in deep space, communication specialists were intercepting the Earth transmissions and rebroadcasting them to hidden populations. On worlds that had submitted to Council control, resistance movements were forming around the simple truth that Earth had proven. Together, they were stronger than their oppressors. Admiral Xerex Prime looked around his bridge at officers whose loyalty to the Council was visibly wavering as they realized the implications of what they had witnessed. He thought of his family on his home world, of the life he had built in service to an organization that he was beginning to understand had been built on lies. All ships, he said quietly into his communication system, stand down. Prepare for surrender protocols. As the Council fleet powered down their weapons and shields, Admiral Martinez opened a channel to the entire Sol system. This is Admiral Martinez to all Earth forces and refugee populations. The threat is over. We are victorious. But even as celebrations began across Earth, and on the refugee ships still arriving in increasing numbers, Admiral Martinez knew that the real battle was just beginning. They had proven that the Council could be defeated, but now they had to prove that something better could be built in its place. The galaxy was watching, and for the first time in generations, it was watching with hope. 6 months after the Battle of Earth, Dr. Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Unity Station, humanity's first orbital diplomatic facility. Through the massive transparent aluminum windows, she could see dozens of ships from across the galaxy. Not warships this time, but vessels carrying delegations, refugees, and representatives from worlds that had declared independence from Council authority following Earth's example. The transformation had been extraordinary. What had begun as a desperate last stand by a single planet had cascaded into a galactic revolution that the Council's propaganda machine couldn't suppress or contain. The recordings of Earth's victory, combined with the testimonies of refugees and documentation of Council crimes, had spread through communication networks like wildfire. "The morning briefing is ready, Dr. Chun," said her assistant, a young Nexari named Crystal Song, whose people had been among the latest to seek refuge on Earth. "Representatives from 47 worlds are requesting immediate admission to the Alliance." Dr. Chun nodded, but her attention was caught by a particular ship in the viewing area. The former Council flagship Galactic Order, now renamed the New Harmony. Admiral Zarex Prime had not only surrendered his fleet, but had requested asylum on Earth, bringing with him detailed intelligence about Council operations and a formal request to stand trial for his own crimes. His cooperation had been instrumental in coordinating the peaceful liberation of dozens of worlds. "How many refugees did we process this week?" Dr. Chen asked. 12,000, Crystal Song replied, her crystalline features glowing softly with pride. "But, Dr. Chun, they're not all refugees anymore. Many are coming here to join the revolution, to learn from what we've built, to take these ideas back to their own worlds." The transformation of Earth itself had been equally remarkable. What had started as refugee camps had evolved into integrated communities where human and alien architecture blended seamlessly. Research centers where impossible combinations of technology were being developed. Universities where students learned from teachers representing hundreds of different species and philosophical traditions. But most importantly, Earth had become the headquarters of something entirely new. The Galactic Diversity Alliance, a confederation of worlds dedicated to the principle that civilization's strength came from its variety, not its uniformity. Dr. Chun made her way to the main conference hall where delegates from across the galaxy were gathering for the daily coordination meeting. The scene would have been impossible to imagine just a year earlier. Beings from dozens of species working together on equal terms, sharing resources and knowledge without the fear of Council retribution. "Good morning, everyone," Dr. Chun said as she took her place at the circular table designed to accommodate different physiological needs. "Today we're addressing the situation in the Vegas sector, where 17 worlds have requested assistance in establishing independence from Council authority. Captain Killa 9, now wearing the insignia of the Alliance Defense Force, activated a holographic display showing the strategic situation. The Council is trying to maintain control through a blockade, preventing supply ships from reaching newly independent worlds. They're hoping to starve the rebellion into submission." "Typical Council thinking," observed Dr. Nira Vex, who had become the Alliance's head of refugee affairs. "They still don't understand that they're fighting an idea, not just a military force." Professor Jorik, his ancient features showing satisfaction, spoke up from his position as chief historical advisor. "The pattern is consistent across all sectors. Worlds that embrace diversity and cooperation are successfully resisting Council pressure. Worlds that attempt to maintain single-species uniformity are falling back under Council control within weeks." Admiral Martinez, participating via holographic projection from Earth's surface, addressed the tactical situation. "Our intelligence networks report that approximately 30% of Council military forces have defected to Alliance worlds. The Cultural Enforcement Division has been disbanded, and several Council member worlds are experiencing internal uprisings. But the most significant news came from an unexpected source." Dr. Elena Vasquez appeared on the communication screen, speaking from a research station orbiting the former Council homeworld of Centralis Prime. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all classifications," she said, barely containing her excitement. "We've made contact with the Council's own archives. What we've discovered changes everything we thought we knew about galactic history." The hall fell silent as Dr. Vasquez shared her findings. The Galactic Council wasn't the first interstellar civilization. There were others before it, confederations, alliances, and democratic federations that spanned thousands of years. But they were all systematically destroyed or absorbed by the Council's predecessor organizations. The Council's standardization policies weren't designed to create efficiency. They were designed to prevent the kind of cooperation that might challenge their authority. She paused, looking directly at the assembled delegates. Every species in this room, every culture that was exiled or suppressed, every tradition that was labeled dangerous, they all contained pieces of knowledge that the Council's predecessors tried to erase. We're not just fighting for our right to be different. We're fighting to restore wisdom that was deliberately lost. The implications rippled through the assembly like shock waves. Dr. Chun felt the weight of revelation settling over the room. "You're saying that the diversity we're defending isn't just valuable for its own sake. It's the key to recovering lost knowledge that could advance all of our civilizations." Exactly. The agricultural techniques the Zarathi refused to surrender? They were based on principles developed by an ancient confederation that achieved sustainable abundance across hundreds of worlds. The Kelmorian biological systems? They contained genetic libraries that preserved the biodiversity of entire sectors. The Threnodai, philosophical traditions? They were the foundation of diplomatic systems that maintained peace for millennia. As Dr. Vasquez continued her presentation, the assembled delegates began to understand that they weren't just rebels fighting against oppression. They were the inheritors of a galactic legacy that spanned eons, the carriers of knowledge that could transform civilization itself. Captain Keela, 9, stood slowly, her forearms gesturing with formal ceremony. "Dr. Chun, I request permission to make a formal proposal to this assembly." "Granted, Captain. I propose that we stop calling ourselves refugees and exiles. We are the Restoration, the ones who will return lost knowledge to the galaxy, who will rebuild the cooperation that was destroyed, who will restore the diversity that was suppressed. We are not the cast out. We are the chosen ones, chosen by history to heal what was broken." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Delegates from dozens of species rose to their feet, appendages or other anatomical configurations in a display of unanimous support. The hall filled with sounds of approval in hundreds of languages and communication methods. Dr. Chun felt tears running down her cheeks as she realized what they had accomplished. They had started with 300 refugees fleeing certain death. They had become a movement of millions fighting for freedom. Now, they were transforming into something even greater, the restoration of galactic civilization itself. Over the following weeks, the momentum became unstoppable. World after world declared independence from Council authority. Ancient knowledge was recovered and shared freely. Technologies that had been suppressed for generations were redeveloped through cooperative research. Art, music, literature, and philosophy flourished as cultures long thought extinct were revived and celebrated. The Council's final collapse came not through military defeat, but through simple abandonment. When their own core worlds began embracing diversity and joining the Alliance, the remnants of the authoritarian government simply faded away like shadows before sunrise. A year after the Battle of Earth, Dr. Chin stood once again on Unity Station's observation deck. But this time she wasn't alone. Beside her stood refugees who had become citizens, enemies who had become allies, and strangers who had become family. "Do you think Colvin would be proud?" asked Crystal Song, referring to the dying Zarathi diplomat whose warning had started humanity's preparation for this moment. Dr. Chun smiled, watching the ships of 100 worlds traveling freely through space that had once been controlled by fear and tyranny. "I think he would say we've only just begun. The galaxy cast them out, and Earth opened its arms. But now we all have work to do." She gestured to the vast expanse of space visible through the station's windows, where new exploration ships were departing daily to rediscover lost worlds and reconnect scattered peoples. "We have a galaxy to heal and forever to do it in." In the depths of space, new refugee ships were still arriving daily, but They no longer carried the desperate fleeing from persecution. Instead, they carried the hopeful seeking to join the greatest cooperative endeavor in galactic history. The restoration of civilization based on the simple truth that diversity was strength, cooperation was power, and every voice mattered. The galaxy had cast them out. Earth had opened its arms. And, together, they had changed the universe forever.